Hello, everybody, and welcome to How to Have Extraordinary Relationships with me, Lucy Cavendish, the author of How to Have Extraordinary Relationships. And I'm delighted to be here with Dr. Sophie Slade, who plays a big part in my book because I've trained with Sophie over the years. I've just spent a weekend with her on an Imago conference. She is a senior Imago clinical instructor. She's a global citizen. She lives between Canada, the States, the UK. She speaks languages. She's a remarkable person. She's also been with her husband, David, for 40 years. And as she's told me, she's known him biblically for 50. So, welcome to the podcast, Sophie. Thank you so much for being here.
Thank you, Lucy. It's lovely to be here, and that was quite a build-up.
Quite a build up for quite a person. So I've trained a lot with Sophie, and I've also spent a lot of time watching her do all sorts of demos and clinical trainings. And you just bring such an energy to the room. And the last workshop I was in was about sexual intimacy. And I'm wondering if you'd like to start telling us a bit about sexual intimacy with couples, because you and David very bravely and very honestly did a demo for us around couples talking to each other and relating to each other about their intimate lives. So I wonder if you could give us an idea around that, just to kick us off in the deep end.
Well, I never thought I'd end up focusing quite so much on sex in my life. I seem to be the person within the one of the people within the Imago community who really has an interest and a passion for helping couples work through some of the sexual challenges. I'm not a sex therapist, so the work I do is really about helping couples to enhance their sexual relationship. And that comes out of my own pain. David and I struggled for years around both feeling very inadequate within our sexual relationship. We had very different levels of desire, which is not uncommon in couples. It's the most common challenge that couples face. And we didn't know how to talk about sex, except to, even when we learned the Imago dialogue, which has been tremendously helpful to us in so many areas of our relationship. Mostly what we talked about when we had dialogues was the pain that we were in. And that never helped us to feel hot and horny again, as we had done for a good few years at the beginning of our relationship. We'd never kind of whipped each other's clothes off and leapt into bed following those discussions.
No.
Um, so we've been on our own journey and learned how to talk about sex in much more erotically arousing ways.
So you seek a lots of couples. I find with couples the two big issues they struggle to talk about is sex and money.
Mhm.
Um, how do you get people to talk about sex? Where do you feel the wounds come from? I know this is a big subject, but I think it's really helpful for people to get an idea because a lot of people are finding it very hard to get their sexual needs met or even talk about their sexual needs, whether they're in a couple or they're single.
Mhm. Well, I think a lot of people don't really know what their sexual needs are.
Yes.
Um, or they know what they are, and uh, they, like with all of our needs, some of us know what our needs are, but the way we express them can sometimes be through criticism, through shaming the other, through making the other feel bad for not meeting them, or we don't express them at all, or we don't even know ourselves what they are. So part of the work I do is helping couples to have dialogues where, excuse me, where they start to think about and explore. It's really a process of exploration, self-exploration, and then sharing the self with the partner so that you start to have a sense of who you're in relationship with and what they do need. Because how can you meet their needs if you don't know what they are? Or if you're being criticized for not meeting them, in which case you'll probably go into protecting yourself from the criticism rather than being highly motivated to meet your partner's needs and help them feel loved. So we get caught in those ineffective dances.
Yes, they're ineffective. Um, is there something around sort of wounding around, where people come from with their feelings about intimacy? I mean, not just talking about sex, but I'm talking about intimacy. Are you able to help couples through seeing where their wounds are? How does that happen in your work?
Well, in Imago, we have a theoretical premise that we're born in relationship. We feel loved, cared about, hopefully, in relationship. We grow up in relationship. We have all these experiences of relationship, and sometimes those experiences of relationship are painful. We don't get our needs met. It's impossible as a parent. I'm a parent. It's impossible for us to meet all our kids' needs perfectly, in every situation. And it probably wouldn't be very helpful for them or healthy for them if we did, because then they'd be very ill prepared for this world that we do actually live in,
Yes, they need a bit of mess up. They need a bit of mess, yeah.
Yeah. We need to know, we need to learn how to cope when our needs aren't met. So we develop these adaptive strategies. If we, for example, if our pain, our hurt is around feeling that our parents weren't there for us enough right from the start, that they didn't want us, they didn't need us, or the pain, the contact when it was there was painful, then we'll adapt by either trying to get them to be there for us, trying to hold on to them, keep them present for us, or we'll detach from our own needs for other people to be there, or both. Most of us do both, depending on the nature of the relational situation. Those adaptive strategies that we develop for each developmental thread, so connecting, exploration, identity, competence, those different threads that we go through, we develop these adaptations, and those adaptations will show up in our couple relationships, those adaptive strategies when we're experiencing pain. So for David and I mean, sort of, when we're not particularly needy around each other's presence, we do both travel a lot and we spend a lot of time apart, and we're fine with that. But in the sexual relationship, he couldn't put his needs aside. He was very connected. I mean, he's got high testosterone levels, or used to have. They're now, but
If he's
they
older, yeah.
are very high. And so he wanted sex, he needed sex. It was also his way of expressing love. It was his way of feeling connected. So he came on with a lot of sexual energy. I, on the other hand, had detached from my sexual needs. As an English girl growing up in the 50s, that wasn't okay. You got yourself in trouble if you were well connected with your sexuality. You either got pregnant, which was a disaster back then, before birth control, or you were labeled as a slut or cheap or whatever. And there were a whole lot of messages around that. So I learned to detach from my sexuality, just to not feel it. And I think it's, there's a lot in the literature these days about spontaneous desire and responsive desire. And I didn't feel a lot of spontaneous desire, except when I was in romantic love. When I was in romantic love, I was hot and horny all the time, thinking about sex, wanting sex, looking forward to being with my partner, whoever that was. But then once I got into committed relationship where sex became an obligation, it's something you do for your husband because men need it, was the message I got. So I detached again from my own sexuality. So here's David showing up with his kind of clinging, trying to get me to be there for him energy. And here's me detaching and blaming and shaming him for all this sexual energy he was coming at me with. So it wasn't pretty, it wasn't fun, it was very painful for us for many years until we really started working it through in some different ways.
Do you know, I hear this a lot. I think that's really key. The spontaneous desire versus, not versus maybe, but and the difference with responsive desire. So responsive desire is what is I've got to have is lie back and think of England, or I've got to do this because my partner wants to have sex. Well, that's the message, isn't it, really?
Well, responsive desire is when you have a willingness. I think the willingness to engage is key. Dr. Pat Love, who wrote Hot Monogamy, she talked a lot about willingness. And I think the willingness to be involved sexually. When I realized that what I was detached from was my own sexuality, it was a part of me, an important part of me, I started to want to get that back and reclaim it. So that shifted something about my willingness. Rather than defending myself against David's advances, which felt intrusive and penetrating, if I may use the word, I started to say, okay, this is part of me I want back. So I started to show up differently with my willingness. Once you're willing, and even before I was willing, as soon as David and I started to engage in a sexual encounter, I would get turned on. So when we did have sex, even during our worst sexual power struggle years, I would get turned on, and then I would have an orgasm. So I was much more responsively aroused rather than having it spontaneously within me, where I was going around thinking about sex, wanting sex, having sexual fantasies and so on. Now I make sure I do. And now that with David's diminishing hormone levels, and I've got more androgen and postmenopausal, all that stuff. I'm more the one now who is interested in sex, who thinks about having it, who fantasizes. My brain is my biggest sex organ, as so many people have said. So I use my brain to get me there. So I want to have sex, and because we can't count on the hormones anymore to get us there. So
So yes, so a lot of people come, I think, as couples with what they believe is a mismatch. It feels like a mismatch, and they're on the verge of breaking up.
yeah.
The woman, it tends to be the woman, but not always, finds that the man is badgering her, and and she's gone into a kind of the tortoise in the shell, and she's not coming out. And he's
Yeah.
chimping, trying, because there's the chimp tortoise analogy in a moment. He's trying. What do you do with couples like that? How do you help them through? Because it feels like they come to me and they say, I think our relationship's over. I'm never going to want to have sex again with this man. It
Mm-hmm.
feels so, that's the end of the world. How do you help people get to what you're talking about, which is let's have a look at it in a slightly different way. Let's up the willingness. How do you get couples to really manage that?
Well, Lucy, I like what you're saying about it. It's not always the man who wants more sex or and in gay and lesbian relationships, the same dynamics can show up. So it's not just a gender thing. But I think the first thing is to get them out of the complaining about what's wrong. I think that's an important piece, but we can get stuck there. We can get stuck going around in circles about, oh, how miserable I am. And you're always badgering me. It feels like harassment, or you're never available, or da 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 da. And that can be so painful, and we get stuck there. So helping the couple to move to thinking about times when the sex was good in their relationship. Particular memories. I love to work with memories um, of wonderful sexual experiences, starting with sexual experiences with each other until there's enough safety to perhaps share other sexual experiences that have been really exciting, really a turn on for them if they're open to that. But starting with their own experiences and helping them to express what they have liked about their their sexual relationship and about each other and themselves as sexual partners. So I do sexual appreciation dialogues with them, something that I really love about you as my sexual partner, as my lover is, which is the demo that David and I did at the workshop. And
Yeah, it was really moving. It was very magical to watch that. Just for people listening, Sophie and David did this sexual appreciation. Something I appreciate about you is, and it might be, the fact that you, I don't know, obviously find me attractive. When someone finds you attractive, that's very sexy, isn't it? It's
yeah,
quite hard
yeah.
to feel sexy if the other person doesn't find you very attractive.
Yes, yes, it can be. Sometimes it can be a turnoff if it feels as though all you see about me is my sexuality. You just see my body. It's not really me. So it's important when you're doing the sexual appreciation dialogues to have a sense of what you really appreciate about that person as a human being. So that's a good place to start because the sexual relationship happens in the context of the larger relationship. And improving your relationship as a whole doesn't necessarily improve your sexual relationship, but it gives you a context within which to do the work. So feeling loved, feeling liked, feeling appreciated by your partner in just the little daily things as well as the bigger things about your personality, who you are, all of those things can help make a big shift because nobody wants to be in a relationship where they don't feel liked or wanted as a human being, not just wanted sexually, but wanted as a human being. So yes, it goes way beyond just the sexual relationship, the intimate relationship, to intimacy as a whole, to connectedness, feeling connected. So yeah, I start with the relationship as a whole often, but as I say, the sexual relationship is a big piece of that for some couples. And if that's what they come in presenting with, talking about, complaining about, if that's the reason for the disconnection or seems like the reason for the disconnection, then we'll work with whatever they're bringing.
Do you find that couples find it difficult to talk about sex or just individuals? Because obviously people listening to it might not be in a couple, but um, I think I'm speaking from obviously from the British point of view, and I'm only one person. I'm not representing the entire of the UK, and also I'm 57, so I'm neither am I talking about people that are younger. But I find in the UK people find it really difficult to talk about sex.
Yeah. I mean, I am so impressed with how far we're coming. That younger people seem to have much more ease in talking about sex. I mean, they've grown up with sex everywhere. It's all around us. Whether they talk about it effectively, in ways that help them to feel physically connected, help them to enjoy their sexual relationships more. Um, I think so, to some degree. But I also hear that young couples are having less sex than their parents' generation. Um, what that's due to, I don't know. Whether we did it out of duty to a large extent, it was something you had to do on a regular basis, and whether younger people feel more freedom around their sexuality. But I think also all the devices that people spend time on, the busy lives people have, um, connecting with another human being is a challenge. And
Yes.
I still believe that the best sex happens within an environment of safety and connectedness. So the
Yes.
safety to risk, the safety to take risks, to be more of who you are, the safety to explore things that perhaps are a bit edgy. I mean, I think good sex needs a little bit of risk taking and edginess. And if it's too safe, it kind of,
Yeah.
can become the same old.
So a friend of mine, sorry, a friend of mine who's a bit older than me and he's gorgeous and lovely, but we were talking, he's a therapist, we were talking about sex and sex, how we, help people talk about sex. And I was talking about the role of fantasy and how people might play that out safely or whatever. So there's a bit of an edge. And he said, well, I don't really have any fantasies. I was like, well, you have absolutely no sexual fantasies. And he was like, no, I have none. I was like, don't ever tell any potential dates that. I was like, why would you tell anyone? But he was really shocked. So I think, yeah, it's interesting that the younger generation are apparently having less sex. I think people are busy. And I think there's a lot of um I think people get a lot of praise for being busy and for doing and
Yeah.
achieving. I think that takes people out of out of connection into disconnection. Have you found that with younger couples or any couples that they're doing so much that they're not really being together?
Yeah, it's hard to tell which comes first. Are we doing so much to avoid the intimacy? Because that's the most dangerous place. That's where we got hurt in the first place, is in our closest relationships. So there's a lot of terror about being too close and about being intimate. And if I really, really connect with you deeply, I show up naked with my soul exposed, I could lose you. In fact, I probably will at some point. One of us will die, one of us will get sick, one of us, So it's a very dangerous journey, developing that kind of deep intimacy with another human being. Um, and but even beyond that kind of existential loss that we consciously or unconsciously are aware of and anticipate, there's the momentary losses of criticism, shaming, um, unavailability, all of those little mini losses that we have in our daily lives. If we count on this person and we really want them and know that we're connected with our desire for them, they may not be there for us, and they may not be there for us in the ways we want. They may have their own needs, bless them for that. They're not just put on the planet to meet our needs. They're their own person. So all of that makes it really difficult and challenging to connect at a deep level. And so I think people get busy, which can be very rewarding sometimes, in order to avoid the challenges and the terrors of intimacy. And then that becomes self-fulfilling, and then we add children to the mix, and then we add aging parents to the mix, and then we add, whatever to that mix. And so sex can become very kind of functional. We
Yeah.
haven't had sex for a while, we better do it, and
Yeah, or we do it every Tuesday.
yeah, we do it every Tuesday or whatever it is, and it's not really deeply connecting on a truly intimate level for anyone. So,
Yeah. Now you talked about actually about booking sex, and I think you were saying that that is about the significant gesture to be willing. It's investing in the willingness. It's saying, okay, I am here. I'm here for this relationship.
mhm. Yeah, David and I, we have tryst time, and we know that we're going to have tryst time. And that means that we're willing during that time that we've set aside to engage with each other on a physical, sexual level. And so we get a sense of the anticipation, just like we used to do when we went on a date when we were first together. We knew we were going to be together, so there was that excitement, but it's what you make of it. If it becomes, oh God, we're going to have sex this morning or this evening or whatever, da da da. It's all about what you do with your head.
Hmm.
If you get yourself there, if you take time to have sexual fantasies, if you can do that. Not everybody does have sexual fantasies, as your friend. I mean, that's not uncommon. Some people don't have any visual fantasies, visual imagination. Um, So sexual fantasies are different for different people, but just maybe sexual memories or whatever or touching your own body or having a bath, lighting candles, whatever is going to help you to make the shift from everyday modality to vulnerable sexual connection space. I think it's important to get yourself there rather than, oh God, gonna have to have sex today.
Yes, yes, it's like the dreaded date night.
Yeah, which can be horrible or it can be lovely, depending
Yeah,
on your head, how you prepare yourself, the stories you tell yourself. I mean, those stories
yes,
that we live within are so powerful. If a guy says, "Oh, he's going to want to have sex with me," oh God, it's going to be all about him or her or whatever. Or I'm going to have to perform. I'm going to have to get it up, and mm, don't really feel like it. But so I think within a relationship where you've done a lot of work, being able to talk about these things, sometimes when it's tryst time, we just don't feel like it. Let's put this off, let's do it some other time. So there's the freedom to do, there's so much freedom within a relationship where you can talk about it, where you can be open and honest about who you are as a sexual human being, because we're not always the same and we're not always in the mood. And sometimes we can't even get ourselves there.
yes. So how did you get into all this work that you do? I mean, what got you from being that 1950s English, well brought up young lady? I'm not saying you're not a well brought up person now, but you're living a very different life to the one you might have thought you were going to lead.
Yes, yes, I am. I think I needed, first of all, to distance myself from all those cultural messages that I got about that. The way I did that to some degree was to emigrate when I was
Yes.
19. Um, but I think you can do it. You don't have to move 3,000 miles from home to move away from those. I think starting to challenge those messages and then I've been really, really blessed. I came across Imago relationship therapy in 1990, I think, when a little magazine came through the door which mentioned Harville Hendrix' book, Getting the Love You Want. I went and did a training in San Antonio, Texas, with Harville for 3 days, and it was an absolutely pivotal moment in my life. Changed it completely.
Wow.
I'd done my doctoral dissertation on couple relationships at that point because I was interested, because I'd been through a divorce and I was in a new relationship. So I wanted to see how personality and satisfaction, personality fit and satisfaction with the relationship kind of lined up. So Harville's book, which I think is brilliant and is probably the best book I've still ever read about couple relationships. Um, so I did that, and then I gave David the workshop for his birthday because I thought he needed it. He was
You're like,
he was
you
the
want to be
problem.
with me, honey? You got to go through the getting the love you want workshop, which actually I have to tell everyone is are brilliant, and Sophie runs them. But we'll do that at the end. But I've been on that workshop. It's fabulous. Really, it's really quite a remarkable experience, actually. So you took David on one of those, did you?
David gave it to him, so he couldn't really refuse because it wasn't his bag at all. Going to a touchy-feely workshop, he thought, in New York City, which he thought was so dangerous.
Mm.
But he came along, bless him, and he's been on this journey with me every step of the way. We've been really blessed, but I had to learn to make it safe for him to be with me, to be on the journey with me, not criticize him when he wasn't at the same place as I was, because I was using this all day, every day in my office, training to be an Imago therapist. And he would go to work and he'd do his thing and not think about, any of this stuff. So I had to learn to create a lot of safety for him, and really sort of see that he was a different person having a different experience around this, which has been a gift in our sexual relationship too. He's a different person. He has different experiences. And part of the joy of the discovery is learning about what sex is like for him, learning
Yes.
about his past sexual experiences, learning about what turns him on, his desire, all of that. So it's really a discovery not only of myself, but also of him. And I think that's how we connect so deeply around this. But yeah, I got into being an Imago relationship therapist, and then I became a workshop presenter, then a clinical instructor. And and because of our own struggles and my own journey to reconnect with my body and my sexuality, it's become, I guess, a focus. And I've developed training for therapists around that. David and I have written a book, which we're hoping to get published soon, about sex. We've developed a workshop that has been accredited by Imago. So we seem to have immersed ourselves in this, and my mother would be horrified.
So
That's
tell me,
part of the
yes.
titillation of it.
Well, I
You know,
mean, as I said, when I think there's a lot of messaging when we're young. Again, we're maybe a different generation, but men only want one thing. This obsession with not getting pregnant. So sex, I never got any messaging around sex is a beautiful, enjoyable, amazing thing. It
yeah,
has like it's so much around sex. It's brilliant and good. It's a hot wire for connection. It's a hot wire for your body to feel fabulous, and that's a wonderful thing. None of that messaging happened when I was a kid. And I think that's very difficult, isn't it, for people? And men get very different messaging. They're supposed to be a stud or, have you found that with your couples that they come with very different messaging from when they were young?
yeah, yeah. Very different messaging. Less so now. I think there's much, much, much more room for women to experience themselves as sexual. But it's still dangerous with all the sexting and the photographs being spread out around the internet. There are still dangers. They're new dangers. They're different dangers than they used to be. But the potential for being shamed around your sexuality is still there. And why we do that to each other, I guess it comes out of our own discomfort with our own sexuality. But I think it's a
Yes,
very sad thing.
it's a
But
really sad thing.
yeah, at least there are a lot of movies now and TV shows that do present positive images of sexual relationships. I hear from so many people that when they were growing up, as soon as couples started to kiss, mum or dad would go over and turn the TV off. You
Yeah,
know, it was an absolute no. But now that I don't think that happens. I think there's much
no.
more sex positive messaging in the culture. So
Yes. So tell me about the book that you and David have written. What's it called?
it's called Satisfying Sex for Committed Couples.
And people can't get hold of it yet. It's not a downloadable book. It's something that you want to get published.
Yes, yeah, I want to get published. I've sent it off to several publishing companies and I'm waiting to hear. I've heard back from one, a very positive um, response from one publishing company, but I'm waiting for the others. And I heard of another one recently that I'll send it off to. So I'm in that process. But it was very interesting to write. I started out looking at sex within the context of the whole relationship and what relationships generally need. It's very Margot based. It's based
Yes.
very much on the work of Harville Hendricks. But and the dialogue process and the appreciation dialogue is one of the first dialogues, and sharing their experience of talking about sex. So, what did you learn about talking about sex? How was it for you growing up? Who did you learn that from? Because a lot of us, the only place we talk about sex is on the street. It's not in our families, and that's not exactly a good place to learn to talk about sex in ways that increase intimacy. So there's a whole piece around just talking about sex and And then what I look at is the sexual arousal cycle that's been identified, or the stages of sexual arousal cycles that have been identified by people like Masters and Johnson, Rosemary Basson, Pat Love, and so on. And not necessarily in that order, because for those who are responsively, who feel responsive desire, stimulation can come before desire, and so on. So they're not necessarily in a fixed order. But I do talk, or we do talk about willingness
Yes.
and how to enhance the willingness. And there are some dialogues about that. Desire. I see desire as a whole body mind experience. And so what enhances desire? Sexual memories of wonderful times, sexual fantasy dialogues. I mean, all kinds of dialogues to enhance one's own levels of desire.
Yes.
And to know your partners, what turns your partner on sexually. And then arousal, which I say is the body experience. The penis gets hard. Um, Women lubricate the vulva, the vagina becomes lubricated, the vulva engorge, and so on. This is all those lovely juicy bits.
Mm.
The juice starts to flow basically in arousal. So I look at those and how to enhance those. That phase of the sexual arousal cycle, and learning about each other and about the self again, and sharing that. And then plateau, which I don't talk about much, but tantric workshops are great in helping people manage plateau. So you can get to just before orgasm and then back down again. And
Yeah.
then, all of
So
that.
you're prolonging your intimacy and
Yeah,
experience. Yeah, yeah. Tantra's very good on that. Yeah.
yeah. And then orgasm. I mean, do you have any idea what somebody else's orgasm is like?
No,
You
but I should.
and it's
Yeah.
so different,
Yeah,
I
it's a
mean,
really good thing, isn't it? What does your partner's orgasm feel like to them? Yeah, we
today.
don't ask that. Yeah, we don't
It
ask
may have
them.
felt different yesterday or last week, or, when they were younger or whatever. Sometimes it's just that little gentle tipping over the edge, and sometimes it's, every cell in my body is going to blow apart, and I'm not sure if it's going to come back together again ever, sort of experience. So I invite couples to share that through poetry, through dance, through collages, and through dialogue. So there's that. And then after the orgasm, that wonderful kind of potentially wonderful period of post-orgasmic glow, when you're flooded with the oxytocins and those great chemicals of connectedness and bonding, and so on, the proverbial cigarette, or some
Yes.
people like to go to sleep straight after. Some people like their partner to go to sleep. Oh, look, I've got you so relaxed. You're falling asleep. Aren't I brilliant? So just having dialogues about that, and yeah. And then the refractory period. What's the time you like between sexual experiences? Some it's very short, and for younger people, it's usually very much shorter. Whereas for older people, you may need more sort of recovery time, or so just being able to talk about those things in safe ways, that because otherwise, if we don't know, we make up stories,
Yes.
and we bung those stories into that knowledge gap. And often the stories aren't very nice stories. You don't want me, you don't care about me, all you ever think about is sex. I mean, all of those stories that we project into that space between. So the more we can learn about each other, the more we can talk about it, the more we can say, I'm making up a story right now about this, then we can get through it and live in the reality of what is, rather than what we imagine is the reality,
Yeah.
without challenging it or questioning it. So I think, being able to communicate effectively about all of this is just really a powerful way of changing the dynamic from not wanting to be together because it's so painful to loving being together because it's so enriching and rewarding and connecting.
That's beautiful. And this is how we build extraordinary relationships.
Yeah.
However hard that sounds, it's how we build it by this curiosity, connection, capacity to hear the other person. Again, the dialogue is key to
Mm.
bring down the reactivity, the validation.
Another part of the book, after I looked at those stages of the sexual arousal cycle, the next part I go into is following the developmental theory, Harville and Helen's presentation of the developmental threads, as I call them. He calls them stages, but I see them as lifelong threads of connecting, exploring, identity development, and competence, which show up within those first 6 years of life, but then do extend beyond that. And I think that's, those, an understanding of what we need at each developmental stage, how we adapt if we don't get those needs met, and how that shows up in the sexual relationship. And then how we can use an understanding of those developmental needs to enhance our sexual relationship is really, really helpful. So there's a whole section about that in the book so people can understand kind of the stuff that's underneath that may be going on
Yes.
underneath the challenges they're having in the now. You're not there for me. You don't want me. The contact with you is too painful. Those kinds of dances that come up in our sexual relationships. I then look at imago theory around the missing self, the parts of ourselves that we gave up in childhood in response to those messages that we've been talking about, those repressive messages of socialization. So we lose access to some parts of ourselves, or we develop anxiety about expressing it. So I look at the lost self, the denied self, the parts I would never, who, me? No, not in a million years. Those parts of our sexuality that we see in others and despise in ourselves and deny that we've got. And then the disowned parts of our sexuality that we really admire in other people, but would never let ourselves express. And then the hidden self and the presentational self, these aspects of the self that we develop and give up as we grow up in order to be safe, basically.
Yes. Yeah,
And
it's big
then,
work.
yeah, and then I go into the I look at Gary Chapman's work on the love languages
Mm,
and how to apply that to the sexual relationship. So words of
mm.
affirmation, how can we use that and apply it to our sexual relationship? What do both partners need to hear for them to feel affirmed in their sexuality and so on? So I take those 5 love languages and just look at how we can enhance, because most of us have a specific love language that we are
Mm.
most comfortable with, most familiar with. That's what feels like love to us. For some of us, it's words, for others, it's actions. And we usually give love in the ways that we want to receive it.
Yes.
So looking at all 5 love languages can expand our ways of expressing our erotic love for each other. And then I look at the end, the book covers a bit about changes across the lifespan in response to life events and childbirth, aging, all of those different things that impact our sexuality and our sexual relationship. So that's the
Major work. Yeah.
yeah.
I really hope it gets published because I'm sure a lot of people would benefit from it.
Mhm.
Couples, singles benefit from this understanding. Sounds brilliant.
Well, if I don't get a publisher who's interested, I'll self-publish. So
Yes. Yes. So
get it out there.
where can people find you? If people want to know more about this, want to know more about you, want to come and do some of your workshops or trainings, where's the best place for them to find you?
My website, sophieslade.com.
sophieslade.com. Yeah, that's the
And
best place.
my email, they can write to me, Slade, SLADE .imago, IMAGO, at iCloud.com. So those
Brilliant.
are the best ways to reach me.
So thank you so much for coming and talking so openly and honestly and helpfully about intimacy and your work and sex. It's been joyous and really thought-provoking. It brings up a lot of stuff in people. So
Mm.
it's a big dialogue to be had around this that I know you're bringing into the forefront of your work and other people's work, which is brilliant. It certainly has really, really brought up a lot of stuff for me about how I work and sex. And so I think a lot of people have got a lot out of this. Thank you so
Thank you.
much for being here.
It's been a tremendously joyous journey of discovery for me and from David and I. So yeah, I hope other people can benefit also and don't have to stay in those painful places. That's my wish and my hope in doing this work. So thanks, Lucy. It's been lovely being with you again. And yeah, I look forward to hearing more about your podcasts.
Thank you.